Hi everyone, welcome back to Jungle Citizens. My name is Alex, and behind the screen you have Christina, and we have been living for the last 10 years off-grid in the forests of the Western Ghats of Goa. And today we're going to be answering your questions.
So the first and most common question, where are we?
So we are based in Goa, which is a very small state, one of the smallest states in India that's on the west coast of India. So it forms part of the Western Ghats mountain range and the Western Ghats ecoregion. On one side, we have the Arabian Sea, and on the other side, we have these incredible mountains. So it's a really biodiverse, beautiful, and culturally very interesting location.
Where in Goa?
Where in Goa? Well, we've been in a few places. For the first 7 years that we were here, we were living in this incredible place called Kanakona, which is the very, very south of Goa. It's one of the last places of Goa that's really retained its greenery and has lots of biodiversity. It has some incredible wildlife sanctuaries and national parks. Then we moved to the northeast of Goa, right on the other side, into a wildlife sanctuary called the Madai Wildlife Sanctuary. And now we are in a little village called Chandor, which is roughly in the sort of south center of Goa. And this is very much a temporary stop because we're currently in the process of looking for a new forest property that can become a long-term intergenerational forest conservation restoration project and a botanical garden and sanctuary.
So we have someone asking here if you have been to the Western Ghats before.
Yes, we have been to the Western Ghats before. Actually, more than that, we have lived within the Western Ghats. So the Western Ghats themselves are a mountain range, but the Western Ghats ecoregion encompasses all of the areas that are very closely associated with that mountain range. So that includes the lowlands that are there on the western side, because this is where we get a majority of the rainfall. As soon as you cross over the top of the Western Ghats and keep moving east, the rainfall goes down. So we actually live within the Western Ghats, at least the lowland ecoregion.
Okay, we have Erinia 2758 asking, the land is big, how do you manage it?
Okay, so I presume that this was relating to our previous place that was in the Madai Wildlife Sanctuary. It was big. It was 150 hectares. A majority of that was forest land that we were just trying to conserve and protect to do things like prevent poaching or prevent clearing of the forest. 26 hectares was an agricultural space, a plantation, and also some degraded forest. So that was the main area that we were managing because we were dreaming of turning it into this incredible educational ecotourism facility, a botanical garden and sanctuary, and somewhere that could really inspire hope and change in a very remote community that had little opportunities. How did we manage it? We managed it with the most incredible team of people. So we had some workers from the northern state of Odisha, which has a huge amount of tribal communities and is also a relatively forested state in the Eastern Ghats, that were absolutely incredible workers, and very, very quickly they learned how to restore forests, and they were just amazing. We missed them massively. We also had a farm manager that we inherited when we arrived there, and he was from a tribal community from Maharashtra, which is north from us in Goa, and we worked with him to become the real nodal manager of everything, and he also was absolutely incredible. He was somebody that was able to really coordinate all of the things. He was a sponge of information, so he learned so much from us. And then, of course, we worked with the local community from that area because it's really important for the local community to feel a part of what we're doing and also to start seeing the things that we're doing, to see whether any of these things are things that they resonate with and that they can then emulate either from a forest perspective or from an agricultural or plantation perspective.
Next question from John. I'm protecting what's left of the primary forest of its land, but it's hard to know what to do. Does anyone know what to do to help?
Okay, this is a big question. I will try and condense it as much as possible, but there's not really that many answers that can be given because each forest, each place, each biodiversity, ecoregion is different. The best thing that I can say is spend time in your land or in the area that you wish to protect and observe it. try and understand the little systems and processes, understand which birds go to which flowers or which fruits, understand which small plants turn into trees, try and get information on what trees are native or not native. It's really important for us to build a picture of the ecosystem we're operating in the same way as if you work in an office block, you have to understand, for example, where the fire exits are. In a forest, we have to understand what all the things are that put it together and how it works in that way. So the best thing to do is to spend as much time as possible in the forest and to just sit and observe. I will caveat, there are not that many people in the world that are currently working on forest restoration. The priority very much is on conservation. But it's really important that we start working to restore forests because a majority of forests in the world are degraded. And that includes wildlife sanctuaries, national parks, and other areas. We simply must get better at protecting our existing primary forests and restoring forests back to a primary state as quickly as possible, because that is simply the best way that we can really directly impact the biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis.
He's also saying the forest seems to recover very slowly and a lot of the land is cattle pasture. Do you want to say something about it?
Yes, forests are closed canopy ecosystems. Forests are called forests because they are made up of trees, and trees create this canopy above, which means that the light underneath is very less. There's an awful lot of organic material and biomass that is falling down to the ground, and that's then creating this incredibly rich layer of surface soil. And all of that is aided by all the microorganisms, the fungi, these tiny little critters that are breaking down the material and turning it into usable soil, creating bioavailability of all of these organic materials. Many, many areas all over the world are having their forests converted and turned into pasture land or agricultural land. When that happens, we basically take the roof off a system that requires a roof. And at this point, we start losing all of the functions of that ecosystem. Once you have lost those functions, it is incredibly hard to bring them back because things like grass or invasive species outcompete these trees. Because you have to think, if you're used to growing in a shady, cool, moist environment, if it's a hot, open and dry environment, it's very, very difficult to grow. So it's an incredibly difficult challenge. What we have to do again is understand the ecosystem, understand the different roles of individual plants. So for example, every forest is adapted to some amount of damage, and there are different roles played by different trees. Some trees are pioneers. Those pioneers are specifically adapted to grow very quickly in more open and harsh environments in order to close that canopy initially. And that then allows the environment underneath to be conducive for secondary trees, primary trees, and all the other kind of plants that are required for the forest. So if we spend enough time observing and understanding the systems and processes of a forest, we can then start doing something about these severely degraded areas, such as, for example, pasture lands that are literally just grass, that perhaps 50 or 60 or 100 years ago would have been amazing closed canopy, 35-meter high evergreen primary forests.
Okay, next from Tony795. Do you have any regulations regarding non-native plants? It's not really rewilding if you plant a whole bunch of plants that are not native to that ecosystem.
Yes, this is a massive problem. Many, many people nowadays will be seeing all of these huge campaigns to plant 1 million trees or 50 million trees or whatever it is. Very often these trees are comprised of only 4 or 5 species, and very often they're also not native. It's a massive, massive problem. So absolutely, if you are going to rewild or restore a forest, you must use the native species from that area wherever possible. And we might have to start adapting a little bit over time as the climate changes, but not adapting in such a way where we're bringing Australian species to India or Indian species to South America, because somewhere within that wider ecoregion, there will be the species that are adapted to be able to deal with the changes. Those are the ones that we need to be working with. And as far as possible, we need to understand the biodiversity of our specific ecoregions and using those to rewild the ecosystem. If we don't do that, we're not rewilding, we're planting. And that's not the point. The point is to be restoring these ecosystems, to restore the biodiversity, to restore the ecological functions, and hopefully to give a chance to all of the amazing plants, animals, and other creatures that share this world with us in order to allow them to thrive. So we do two things. The first thing that we do is ecosystem restoration. So to take this property in Madai, for example, in the wildlife sanctuary, that was 150 hectares of property, of which 26 hectares was listed as an agricultural site and a plantation. What we did is we shrunk that 26 hectares down to 8 hectares, and that 8 hectares became a very diverse, closed canopy plantation for spices, for fruits, and other production materials in order to generate some revenue and to show the local community that you can create revenue sustainably. Despite that being a plantation, we planted an awful lot of native species. So a lot of the canopy trees, for example, were natives, and we were then using them to grow black pepper or vanilla or whatever else. That's 8 hectares out of 150. The remaining 142 hectares was purely and exclusively planted with native species, endemic species, and endangered native and endemic species. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to recreate the ecosystem of that area. It's like biomimicry. You can see around me I have a whole bunch of anthuriums and different things. Some are native. This Angiopterus giant fern is native, but a lot of these aren't. The reason why we use these is to inspire wonder. So in that 8 hectare plantation area, we had paths and walkways, and we use that almost like a botanical garden. And in fact, one of our big missions now that we're really trying to make happen is to create a proper botanical garden and sanctuary. The botanical garden element of that includes what we call wildscaping. Wildscaping is creating an environment that makes people go, wow. The first step of getting people interested in biodiversity, in the climate, in plants, in wildlife, is to get them to actually go, wow, this is amazing. And we use every trick in the book, whether it's a giant adansonii leaf or a Monstera leaf or a giant anthurium leaf or this, which is a giant fern, this Angiopterus. It's like fishing. We're trying to catch someone on a bait. Once they have been caught, once they have that little fire inside of them, suddenly the world opens up. And at that point, we can start introducing more of the dialogue around native species. Our wildscaping areas, even if we do them in people's gardens, they always contain native species as well. This is not a purely non-native environment, but we feel it's really important to maximize the human benefit of that space in order to get these kind of people who very often are not conservationists or environmentally minded to start understanding the sheer value of green spaces, of plants, of wildlife, of birds, etc., etc.
We have a few questions of people asking, why did we have to move?
Why did we have to move from our last place? I will be a little bit careful for now with how I communicate about this. Best answer for that is not through choice. We had spent 2.5 years giving absolutely everything, sacrificing everything, our mental health, our physical health, in order to do absolutely everything in our power to maximize the opportunity of that forest and also all the forests around. So, for example, in March 2023, we had the worst forest fires in Goa's history. And our team, we went and dealt with it. We did a huge amount of work. We risked our lives, frankly, getting to some of the most inhospitable and remote areas in order to put out forest fires that were in excess of 20-30 hectares in size. So we were absolutely 100% committed to that ecoregion, to that forest, and doing absolutely in our power to protect it, to prevent the rivers from being, for example, bombed because they do this gelatin fishing in this area, certain individuals, a minority of individuals. And we put ourselves on the front line because we believed it was important, whilst also trying to engage with the community and create opportunities. Unfortunately, it was not our land because we don't have, frankly, the money and the resources to buy land, which means we are always reliant on private landowners or the person we are leasing the land from in order to stay on site. The reality of conservation and restoration and biodiversity is people like it as a soundbite. People like to feel like they're doing something good, but when the bottom line comes, a lot of people don't care as much as they say they do. And a lot of the time it's more about the individuals, or it's more about the image than it is about actually doing something. In this instance, we were entirely focused on the forest. We were entirely focused on opportunities that would create revenue, that would create growth, that would create opportunities, but without at all compromising the biodiversity, in fact, only reinforcing it. That seems to be something that the landowner of that particular land no longer saw as a priority. So, lesson learned, we do our best not to have despair and anger, although I must say there have been many tears since that point, because we cherished that environment to become the most incredible place. But we move on, we move forward, we learn our lessons, and we are now redoubling our efforts to find a way to raise the money that we need to buy our own property that will allow us to create an intergenerational asset for biodiversity and for the state of Goa in the shape of a botanical garden and sanctuary that will be open to all and that will offer incredible opportunities for education and just for spending time in a beautiful environment. So as it is a huge stroke of fortune that it happened, and we move on, hopefully, to bigger and better things that can have a far bigger impact on biodiversity.
So during that move, many people were concerned about the plants, and why did we have to move the plants with us and not leave them there?
We were also very concerned about the plants, and with good reason, because we were asked to move at the end of October, which is when our wet season ends. So firstly, why did we have to move the plants? We had to move the plants because they're our plants. We have spent the last decade here, and that included living in an off-grid eco-village, and one of my passions is plants. So I've been collecting plants for the entire time that I've been here in India. And they're basically our only asset. We don't currently even have a vehicle because our vehicle is broken. We don't have anything really of value. It was simply impossible to have left those plants there, because we would have been essentially gifting the landowner, who frankly did not act very ethically towards us, with plants that were worth in excess of $8,000, $10,000, $12,000, all of which are plants that I have been collecting and cherishing over the past decade. So we absolutely had to take them. In the process of taking them, we have lost at least 30% of our plants. So that means in monetary terms, we've probably lost a few $1,000s worth. And because we had to move, and the environment that we moved into was nowhere near as conducive, and we didn't have any nursery, it meant that we are at least a year plus back in our efforts to pollinate and propagate these plants. So it's ended up having a huge economic impact on us, because one of the very few revenue streams that we have been slowly nurturing with a kind of long-term plan basically got ripped out from underneath us. So we are now trying to consolidate all of our plants, and we're very lucky that the landowner here has put in all of these amazing sprinklers, and we have the bananas to give us at least a little bit of shade. And now slowly our plants are starting to perk up, but we have lost an absolute ton. So we didn't take all of the plants. Every single one of the native plants that we planted in that area, including certain species that are critically endangered, all of those were left. All of the restoration work that we undertook, which is literally thousands and thousands of trees that we nurtured in that land, everything stayed. The only thing that we took were these ornamental non-native plants that formed part of our collection, and a small amount of the forest trees that we still had in pots that we hadn't yet planted. And again, these are all trees and plants that we have collected over time, that we have nurtured, and that then allows us to start again planting these native species in the other areas that we work, including this one. But a vast majority of the tree saplings and every single one of the native plants that were planted in the ground in that ecosystem, all of it stayed. And we're absolutely not there to harm that biodiversity. Even if we have disagreements with a landowner or an individual, it's absolutely not the case that we are ever going to do something that will impact on biodiversity. Very interesting thing just happened. One of the workers here came and gave us this. Invasive species. This is an African land snail. It is not an Indian land snail. This is one of the biggest snails, terrestrial snails in the world, and it is becoming a huge problem, a problematic invasive species in many parts of the world. So for those of you in India, if you ever see a massive snail like this, take it away. And you can keep it as a pet. Many people in Europe keep these as pets because they're quite bizarre and large, or you can eat them. They're very tasty. The only thing you have to do is make sure that you cook them extremely well because they can sometimes harbor parasites. So if you see this guy around in your garden or in your region, please take it out because it is massively harming biodiversity. Maybe we'll eat this one later.
Brocktoon 8. Are you not worried about tick-borne disease? I saw in another video you said you were covered in tick bites.
Yes. The biggest challenge with ticks, frankly, is the fact that my body hates tick bites. So I'm not really that reactive to mosquitoes, but tick bites go crazy on me. And over the past few years, especially working in this project in the Madai Wildlife Sanctuary, I got literally thousands of tick bites a year, which definitely affected my immune system. We are lucky here that there isn't really Lyme's disease as you would get in Europe or in North America, nor do we have that Lone Star tick that gives you that disease that stops you from being able to eat red meat. What we do have here in certain areas is something called KFD, Kiasanur forest disease. That is an incredibly nasty disease that is transmitted through ticks, usually with the host species being monkeys. So there are certain tick-borne diseases here. They're generally, at the moment, relatively restricted to certain areas. So the last place that we worked in that northeast area of Goa, does have this KFD disease. It has not yet been recorded from South Goa where we are now. So yes, it's a risk. Yes, we have to try and mitigate it in every way that we can. But it's not perhaps as risky at the moment as it would be, for example, if you got thousands of tick bites in Europe or anywhere else. Just a very quick important point about ticks. It seems there is a fairly direct correlation between degraded ecosystems and the amount of ticks. So in cashew plantations, in very degraded or dry forests in this region, as you see around the Madai Wildlife Sanctuary and surrounding areas and in plantations, the amount of ticks is astronomical. You can walk through an area of grass and you will have hundreds of them biting you within 5 or 10 minutes. So it seems, as with many things, that one of the biggest solutions to this is to create a balanced, a biodiverse, and a protected ecosystem and a good forest. Because in these areas, the animals also are healthier and happier and stronger. And for whatever reason, the ecoregion is able to kind of balance itself out and avoid these extremities of one species really being able to take over as the ticks have in certain areas.
Mr. Beastie85, how do you overcome the mosquito issue?
So mosquitoes are becoming an increasing problem all over the world, even in areas that didn't used to have mosquitoes because of the climate crisis. So these Anopheles mosquitoes are being found increasingly in the north of Europe, and they're the ones that harbor things like chikungunya and dengue, for example. They're a problem. As I just said with ticks, one of the best solutions is to create a balanced ecosystem from our experience. And this may change in different areas, but if you go to an extremely balanced, old-growth evergreen forest in the Western Ghats, our experience is that the mosquitoes there aren't so crazy. If you go into a village area or a town or a city area, they are insane. So we have to start looking at why the mosquitoes are there. And in many cases, they're there because there are small bodies of water that allows the mosquitoes to breed, and those bodies of water don't have in them any of the predators of mosquito larvae. So, for example, fish or dragonfly larvae or anything like that. Our experience has been over time, the mosquitoes have reduced in every single one of the areas that we have worked because we have created a more balanced ecosystem. We've been able to create an ecosystem, for example, where there are lots of dragonflies. And dragonflies are one of the most important predators of adult mosquitoes. They catch them and eat them on the wing. So our experience is that the mosquitoes don't increase with mulch or with bananas or with anything else. If you are able to create a balanced ecosystem wherein there are lots of things that are predating upon mosquitoes, the problem will not get more severe than anywhere else.
Next, from Dre Philip, what would you do if you encounter termites in some of your mulch piles that are close to your fruit tree?
Okay, termites are our friend. The only time they are not our friend is if they happen to be eating our wooden houses or our furniture or anything like that. There's one thing that needs to be understood about termites. They only attack dead wood or diseased wood. They don't eat living wood. They will, for example, go into mulch piles and they'll break down the mulch. They'll find an old piece of timber that's died and they'll break that down. They're not going to attack a living tree. Even if they're going up the side of the tree, they're only eating the bark on the outside. They're doing nothing to the tree itself. So termites are not a risk to your living plants or your undiseased plants, anything like that. What they are is some of the most incredible animals for breaking down organic material. So they're not actually eating the wood, they're chewing up the wood and then they're bringing it into their colony and making these incredible combs. And those combs basically are used to farm this type of fungus, which is what they need to be able to survive. It's an amazing example of symbiosis, the Termitomyces mushroom or fungus and the termites. One will not exist without the other. And these two together, they perform this incredibly important function of breaking down material that is very hard to break down. Like, for example, lignin in wood, it's very hard. Termites have the ability to go into that, to break it down, and to create bioavailability of the nutrients. Everything that was alive has nutrients in it, but they might not be available to plants. They might not be getting released into the soil. Termites do that. So if you have a termite mound in your forest, in your garden, as long as it's away from your house, if you have a house that's made out of wood or if you have lots of wooden material, leave it. It is absolutely one of the most important elements of a happy, functional, biodynamic and biodiverse ecosystem in these tropical forest areas.
Okay, we have frequent problem of mealybugs in our balcony garden. Please advise what we should do to get rid of this problem.
Okay, that's a very good question. There's a couple of very practical solutions that you can do. The first one is that mealybugs need to breathe, like all animals. So if you have a mealybug infestation, if you get, for example, coconut oil or any other kind of oil, and then you cover them with it, it basically seals them, which means that they can't breathe, and then they die. You can also use things like, for example, neem spray. And if you do that very consistently over a period of weeks, then that will reduce or even eliminate entirely the mealybug problem. Why are mealybugs more likely to infest a balcony garden or a city garden? Because there's not that much forest around or other plants around that the mealybugs can use. So actually I think we've never had a mealybug problem. And that's down to the fact that we're obviously fortunate enough to be growing things in a relatively outdoor state. If a plant is really healthy, happy with good soil and in a green environment where there's lots of opportunities for things that eat plants or drink sap to eat, then it's not going to be a huge problem. So I'm sorry I can't really answer that very well. I don't have so much experience, but neem oil spray and using oil to cover the mealybugs is a fairly effective solution.
From Bremuk, have you thought about setting up a Patreon account or something like a GoFundMe account to purchase land? The land could be held in a trust like a structure to ensure it's only used for eco-restoration.
Yes, that is exactly what we're looking at doing. And this is one of the reasons why we're trying to really invest some time and energy also in this YouTube channel so that we can hopefully expand our reach and have more people on board with our journey and helping and supporting us in whatever way they can. So we are currently in the process of setting up a not-for-profit here in India, along with some of our amazing colleagues and partners, some of which you've already been introduced to over the YouTube channel. And as soon as we have that set up, then we will be starting to look at fundraising. It is a little bit difficult here in India because you cannot get external funds from outside of India for at least 3 years from the setup of the organization because of certain financial rules. So we are going to be restricted only to fundraising within India for the first few years. But hopefully that will be enough to allow us to put enough funds together to be able to purchase this property here in India. At the same time, because I'm German, or at least part German, and all my family are in Germany, and my sort of main residence is in Germany also. We're looking to set up a not-for-profit or a foundation there, and that will become like a land fund, a forest rescue fund, where in the long run, hopefully, we can get enough people supporting that to allow us to really start looking at buying at-risk endangered forests anywhere in the world, and then work to restore them, obviously, and protect them and create opportunities for local communities and everything else. So two-pronged approach. Number one is here in India, setting up a not-for-profit foundation and raising funds here within India in order to have the biggest impact we possibly can on this incredible eco-region that is the Western Ghats. Second one, setting up a European not-for-profit that will allow us to then have a Patreon, for example, and a GoFundMe that goes into Europe to allow us to raise funds on a wider level in a jurisdiction that would then allow us to also purchase land basically anywhere in the world. So stay tuned for that, because this is all stuff that's going to be going on over the coming couple of months. We're working extremely hard and diligently at the moment to set up all of these structures, and hopefully we'll be giving you a lot more news about that very soon.
I'm looking to purchase land for restoration. Can you please guide me on how to go about it? Thank you.
Okay, that's a very broad question. There's no direct answer with that. Great that you're looking to purchase land for restoration. The first question is, I suppose, what does that mean? What are you planning to do with the land? Are you looking for revenue from it? Are you looking to do ecotourism? Are you looking to do sustainable agriculture? Are you literally just purchasing it with the idea of wanting to bring back the forest? Then the next question would be, where are you looking to do that? What is your budget? What kind of ecosystem are you looking to restore? Is it a dry forest? Is it a wet forest? Is it a rainforest? Is it a savanna? Lots and lots of questions. So yeah, difficult one to answer. It's definitely something that we can guide if the question is surrounding a wet tropical forest. So if it's a rainforest, if it's a monsoon forest or a tropical evergreen forest, this is our kind of area of specialization. And if someone really is seriously, genuinely interested in investing in land in order to protect and restore it, and it's tropical forest land, then definitely get in touch with us, and we'll do our very best to help and support you in that process, because frankly, it's one of the most important things now.
Next, Brett Boss. How much light does the bat plant from the beginning of the video receive? I've had one for a few years now, and even though it has grown well, it just won't flower. I'm thinking it may need more light, but I'm not sure how much is too much.
Okay, so again with this, it's very dependent on specific locations, if you're growing it indoors or outdoors, what your eco-region is, etc., etc. Black bat flowers come from northeast India and going into sort of Myanmar and that side. They're a tropical or subtropical species, and they very much require a defined wet season and then a significant drier season. And they also like to have some kind of seasonal variation in temperature, wherein they get a drop of temperature in their winter, which is, I mean, it's not cold. We're talking about sort of 8, 10, 12 degrees, something like that. It's difficult to really answer the question without having more details, but our bat flowers, they do well in shade or in indirect light. They don't do well if they get any direct sunlight or significant light. And here we have this very defined and pronounced monsoon period. So roughly from the end of May until the end of October, we get a good amount of rain. Between October and mid-December, we get a small amount of rain. And then from April onwards, we start getting the rain again. So we have that defined dry season, and then we have that prolonged wet season. If you have your plants in captivity, it's well worth emulating these systems. If you have a time of the year where it's a little bit more humid in your area, use that as a monsoon. Water them a little bit more. If you then have a time of year where you have a drier spell, where the humidity in the air is less, at that point, you can water them a little bit less and have them experience the equivalent of a drier season. If you're able to trigger them by emulating their ecosystem, it's far more likely that you can then also trigger them to flower. So if you have a black bat flower, that would be my suggestion. Have a period of 6 to 8 months where they are, generally speaking, a little bit more watered and more humid, and then have the remainder sort of tailing off into a drier season and then again coming back into a wet season. If you can do that and also provide a correlated hotter and cooler period, I'm sure you can get those plants to flower.
Okay, from NRash 399, do you guys still conduct permaculture workshops?
At the moment, no, because we just don't have any location. So the last workshop we did was a forest restoration and wildlife workshop, which we did with Ben Tao, one of our very close friends and collaborators. And that was done last year in the Madai Botanical Sanctuary in our last place. And it was supposed to be the first of many educational courses and workshops, because we'd created a really amazing example there that allowed us to really show people how you can do things differently. Obviously, we're not there anymore. We're now here. And this is very much a temporary place that we're trying to leave as soon as we can in order to allow us to start building this botanical sanctuary and garden. As soon as we have our own place and we have the basics sorted and we have a little bit of infrastructure to allow people to come and stay with us and, learn with us, then that's one of the things that we really want to be doing, because we would really like to share as much of our knowledge as we possibly can. And of course, there's always so many opportunities to learn more. So by us getting in facilitators and experts to help us with these programs, it also gives us an opportunity to grow and learn. So not right now, but hopefully soon, with a little bit of luck, yes. We are, I would describe us as permaculture adjacent. Permaculture is something that I suppose in theory we do, but we also feel a lot that permaculture has become perhaps a little bit untrue to its roots in many cases. They're using a lot of non-native plants. They're not really learning about the ecosystem or the ecoregion. Very often they end up going in with JCBs to flatten a land before starting again. So we are perhaps not that aligned with some elements of permaculture and some permaculture practitioners. So I would call myself a reluctant permaculturist that is sort of somewhere in that world, but the courses that we do are not really going to be permaculture exactly. They're going to be a whole bunch of different things that are kind of like permaculture, but not really. Also, we are still doing workshops and courses for communities and for schools and things like that. So just a few days ago, for example, we did a workshop on restoring rivers and the forests along rivers with a local community group here. So this community outreach kind of work and workshops is something that continues. Also things on snakes and living with wildlife and everything else. These are things that Ben does an awful lot. So we continue to do workshops, but we can't currently host people on workshops, but hopefully that will change soon.
Okay, next from Shen Garden. The way you move plants, so serious. Are they still alive?
Most of them are. Honestly, we still haven't planted them all. The last 6 months have been so nuts because we have so many things going on that we haven't had time to plant them all. I mean, I can give you some examples here. Look at this poor bloody thing. Is that an adansonii? Anyway, there's one. Look. I think it's an adansonii. You can see the clump here. So, yeah, it's still alive. It's not doing very well, but it's still alive. And this is one of a few that we haven't yet planted, and we've literally just got kind of laying down here. Stuff like this does stay alive. It's really the anthuriums that were a little bit more complicated, and especially the things that are in pots. A lot of the things, especially stuff that was growing up trees, we've just put into the mulch layer and we've allowed them to grow up and go like crazy. So we've got vines of Rhaphidophorus and Monsteras and philodendrons that are just kind of snaking their way all over the place. We have lost certain plants, especially some of the more finicky ones or the ones that we only had one or two of. A couple of philodendrons, a few more of the anthuriums. And yeah, in total, that's something like 30%, mostly because of the potted anthuriums. But yeah, if you saw me ripping any of the plants off the tree, so we're talking about the Monsteras and philodendrons and stuff like that, all of those are actually still alive and doing fairly well. It's all the little smaller baby things that we had in the nursery that really struggled.
From Brett Boss, 8590. So how does germination occur in the wild? Do the berries simply drop to the ground, or are they assisted by animals?
Okay, so this is a question about anthuriums, I remember.
Yes.
But actually it's a question that has sort of way wider connotations. There's lots of different mechanisms by which seeds can spread, water or wind or animals or whatever. Generally speaking, if a seed is covered by a berry or a fruit, it is designed to attract some kind of an animal which will then aid in its dispersal, because animals can move a long way, especially things like birds can move a very, very long way, or bats for that matter, because they can fly. So yes, if you can see a seed that has a fruit or a berry around it, generally speaking, it will be trying to entice some kind of an animal in order to help it to move its seed further afield. So in the case of anthuriums, they start green, and as they ripen, they go purple or red. Generally speaking, fruits that go purple or red, they like to be eaten by birds. I think a lot of mammals have a sort of a red color blindness, a red-green color blindness. So if you see a fruit that's green, very often it's something that's going to be more likely to attract a mammal. So here we have two types of figs generally. There's figs that go either yellow or red, and there's figs that go green. The green ones generally are trying to get mammals to eat them, and the ones that are yellow or red will get birds and mammals to eat them. In the case of anthuriums, because they go purple and red, they're really things that are trying mostly to get the birds to come and eat them and then disperse their seeds. And indeed, probably there's quite a few of the anthurium collectors in the tropical world that will have experienced this. Over here we have bulbuls and barbets occasionally coming and eating the seeds. They're not able to grow because we have this very, very defined dry and wet season. So it's not possible for the seeds to grow in the dry season at all, which is generally when the fruits are fruiting here. The seeds of anthuriums, they only survive for 2 or 3 days. So it's not something that can sit there for a few months until the rains. It really needs to germinate immediately. So it's not really a problem for biodiversity, but absolutely, if it's got a fruit around it or a berry around it, it's probably asking for an animal to eat it and help it on its way.
How many years did it take you to grow this beauty from green goatels?
Okay, so this is talking about the adansonii. We had this massive, monstrous adansonii that you'll probably see now on screen. It's difficult to say exactly how long it took us to grow that plant, because actually we moved it from various different places. So when we had it at the tribe, which was our first place in Canacona, it took us probably about 2.5 years from having your typical small little nursery plant that you buy into having a very large sort of 4-5 foot leafed Monstera that's growing up a tree. So it probably takes, in ideal conditions, somewhere in the region of 2 to 3 years for a small adansonii to become a monster adansonii.
Which method and how often do you water for them to grow that quick?
It depends a lot. So we have these sprinkler systems, these kind of 4.5 meter butterfly sprinklers. And generally speaking, in the first year or two, we have to water quite a lot in order to establish the ecosystem, to really get it functioning. After 1 or 2 years, then we can start reducing it, because plants get used to water. If you give them water every day, then if you don't give them water for 2 days, they'll get really shocked because they haven't really had to invest in the resilience to a drought. So for example, here, let's take this as an example. We've just moved into this place a few months ago. It was a completely raw ecosystem. The bananas weren't particularly big or anything like that. We've had the sprinkler system put in. More or less at the moment, we're watering 3 times a week, and that means a pretty good water, 30-40 minutes worth of water. And because it's a sprinkler system, it waters the whole place. We're not just individually watering plants, because if you just water one plant and the rest of the soil is dry, that water very quickly wicks into all the other areas. So it's not very efficient. So for us, we water probably 3-4 even times a week. And that amount reduces at one point of year. So at least for 2 months, the plants are getting a little bit of drier environments, because that really helps them to trigger in that process of flowering and everything else. But it's extremely dependent. It depends on the plants, it depends on the feeling, it depends on how dry things are, it depends on if there's a drought, it depends on the humidity, all sorts of other stuff. If you have a sprinkler system and you're looking to recreate a tropical rainforest of sorts, my suggestion would be outside of the rainy season. Give it 2 months after the rainy season where you're barely watering at all, because there's still lots of residual water in the ground. And then you start bringing it up again. For us, what that means is rains kind of end by mid-end November. once a week at the most. You water in November, December, January. By February, you then start watering a little bit more as the dry season comes in. And then March, April, you're watering 3 times a week, something like that, until the rains come again. Another important point, the sprinkler system gets used in the evenings, not in the mornings. In the evenings, you have the nighttime coming up, which means that the temperatures drop, which means that you don't have as much evaporation of the water. If you do it in the mornings, then because you have the heat rising all day, you lose a lot more of that water before it has a chance to really go into the ground. So another recommendation with regards to sprinklers or watering, frankly, in our experience, is do it in the late afternoon, evenings. Allow the sun to start coming down, for the temperature to drop a little bit. It doesn't have to be dark, but just has to be that kind of pre-sunset period. That is the best time for you to water your plants, because it maximizes the opportunity of the plants to take up the water and for the ground to really soak. If you water plants during the day, especially the hot part of the day, and if you water the leaves, very often the leaves can start getting sunburn marks, because the water actually kind of amplifies or magnifies the sunlight, which then creates a more extreme environment for the plants. So our experience is the best time to water is, a couple of hours before dark, something like that.
Rituraj Kundu 210, do you sell saplings online?
No, we don't sell saplings online. Maybe at some point when we have an organization that is a little bit bigger and we have a little bit of support in all of the things that we're doing, it could be something that we look at. To be honest, I don't really like sending plants online very much. We did over COVID a little bit just to try and kind of break even and not run out of money. But I think on the whole, it's not really something that we're going to look at massively. Ideally, especially for restoration, you want to be getting plants and seeds and the genomes from your more immediate local vicinity, not from miles and miles away. So if you want to plant, for example, a macaranga tree, you want to get it from this local area rather than getting it from a long way away. As part of our plans for this botanical sanctuary and garden, we will be having a nursery that will be a nursery that people can go to and buy plants, whether they are things like anthuriums and ornamentals, or whether they are natives and endemics and trees and stuff like that. And at that point, we will hopefully also offer delivery around Goa. But if you're from another part of India and you want to get plants from us, then you'll have to have a holiday in Goa, I guess.
I keep hearing horror stories here about the nasty bacteria in soil. But like you, go out bare hand and food getting stuck in. Is there less to worry about it in Goa than in the Australian tropics?
To be honest, that's a very good question, Marcus. I don't know. There's nasties really in all soil, but there's nasties everywhere. Like if you go into a city, to be honest, I think there's going to be more chance of picking up something nasty and horrible there than somewhere else. I don't really know. I don't really worry about it that much. I've had some kind of nasty illnesses and diseases, but they've come either from mammal pee or from an infection that's come from being bitten by something or stabbed by something. Somehow or other, my body's always been able to deal with it. I do feel very much that we're a species getting more and more inclined to sanitizing our environments and to avoiding at all costs any kind of germs and bacteria. And somehow I feel that doesn't make any sense because it reduces the strength of our immune system. So the way that I see it is actually the exposure is not necessarily bad. As long as my body and my immune system is robust, then hopefully I can deal with these things. Am I being naive? I don't know. Maybe there are other parts of the world. I'm sure there probably are other parts of the world where you do have some pretty mega things that you have to worry about. Certainly here in India it is the case, but I've never felt in any way at risk when I'm working with really nice, amazing homemade soil or mulch or, forest soil. I do feel very icky if I'm working in soil that was obviously anaerobic, or if I'm working with soil that has been brought in from a riverbed or somewhere else, or clay. Sometimes I end up feeling that I've got all tingly fingers and burning fingers because a landowner's bought in soil from somewhere else and dumped it because they thought it was good soil, and actually clearly there's some kind of contamination in it. So mostly my concerns are around chemicals and contamination and these kind of human adjacent issues, to be honest. I think the soil in the forest is, on the most part, relatively clean, and I very often have cuts and things on me because I'm climbing trees or whatever, and touch wood. Is there wood anywhere? There's wood. Touch wood. so far I've been all right, and I'll let you know if I haven't, I suppose. If one day I don't manage, then you'll probably find out about it, I guess.
Will goats be able to control the Wedelia?
I've never seen goats eating Wedelia. Goats tend to eat the thing that's nicest for them, and generally that means whatever tiny thing remains that is not a Wedelia. So if there's a little tree growing out, the goats will eat it. If there's a little grass growing out, the goats will eat it. But the Wedelia, they don't really seem to care for, which is why it is expanding absolutely unabated. It's the same with the cows. The cows don't touch it. Very often invasive species become invasive because there's no animals from that region that are eating it, which then allows them to prosper in the way that they do and then outcompete all the other species. So no, generally speaking, goats, from my experience, are not going to help with that. And in general, goats are extremely destructive when it comes to restoring ecosystems. Because any little tree that's coming up, they're going to aggressively browse it and prevent it from growing. So one of the most important things to do if you are restoring a forest, actually, in the first few years, is to put a fence around it in order to stop goats and to stop buffaloes and to stop cows coming in and destroying it. You have to try and make those fences in such a way that allows for the native species to go through, because frankly, deers don't cause the same problem. Here we have these giant gores. They've never caused us a big problem on this front. Porcupines, wild boar, etc., no issue. They are part of the wild and they have a way of balancing it. Goats, cows, water buffalo, humans, massive problem, and they need to be prevented for the first few years of restoration from coming in, because otherwise they destroy everything whilst not actually shifting the dial on all the invasives that we really need them to be doing work with.
Next, from Cherry's leaves. Do you think your plants will survive another move?
I hope so. A lot of the plants that we've planted here in the ground, they'll be staying here in the ground and acting as a kind of plant reservoir nursery, because this is one of our very dear friends and we're trying to make a place that will be incredible and beautiful for him as a landscape, for people that will be coming and staying here in the future, or for guests that he has or whatever. So a lot of the plants that we're planting in the ground are hopefully going to stay here, and the hope is that when we move into this new property, it is going to be a place that we can very quickly create an incredible environment and landscape in that will allow all of these plants to thrive. So yes, invariably moving plants is stressful, as it's stressful for us and for our dogs and everything else. We will survive. We will find a way to get through it, and we will find a way to make the next place bigger and stronger and better and more impactful than the one now. And the plants know that they're a big part of that mission, so I hope very much that they're listening and will be on board with the challenge.
Okay, a few people asking about sphagnum moss. They have difficulty to find it. If you suggest any other alternative to replace it.
So sphagnum moss we use as a kind of very powerful moisture retainer and a way for a lot of the kind of adventitious roots that you get on anthuriums or philodendrons to really effectively grow and maintain the humidity so that it continue growing without losing the water. There are alternatives. There's nothing really that I found that is as good as sphagnum moss. But if you don't have sphagnum moss, one of the best things that you can use is partially decomposed leaf mulch. So collect all of the leaves, preferably from as many different species as possible from your garden, leave them in a pile, let them break down. After a few months, you'll see that it's not one leaf anymore. It's kind of it's a broken down leaf. It's becoming a little bit soily, but there's also still clearly bits of leaf and stick. If you put that in, it will have very much a similar kind of effect. It doesn't work so well when it comes to germinating, but it still does work when it comes to germinating anthurium seeds, just not quite as well as sphagnum moss. My suggestion would be try and find sphagnum moss pretty much all over the world. You can buy it. Try and buy the living one, not the dead one, because many of them are dead. If you can buy the living one, create some kind of a very moist environment that has relatively high light and cool temperatures, and the sphagnum moss will grow. And from that point, you have a permanent resource of sphagnum moss.
Is that moss a forest moss or is it a bog moss? There's tons of forest moss. I'm wondering if it would work.
So sphagnum moss generally is associated with this kind of boggy environment, somewhere that is like partially inundated. And most sphagnum moss comes from there, but it's now sort of used as an interchangeable term for moss generally. So yes, it could work, absolutely. If you're taking moss from the wild, make sure you try and harvest it sustainably. Never rip all of it off. Try and maybe use scissors to cut sections of it off so that that area continues to regrow. but it's worth a try for sure. Moss is something that is able to really hold on to the moisture very well, all kinds of moss. So it should be possible to use it. The only way to know really is to run a little trial and see. And if it's growing really well in your area, then maybe you can start introducing moss if you have trees and plants, because that can then be a direct medium wherein you can plant certain anthuriums and epiphyte. Give it a go, see what happens.
So from Savio Fernandez, 87, hello tribe, how can one donate for your cause?
So right now, the only way that you can directly support our cause, apart from liking and subscribing, is to send us super thanks on YouTube. So there's a little thanks button at the bottom. So if you click that, then we will get a little bit of money for that. So that's one direct way. The other way is that we've just set up a kind of crypto fundraiser, and the link is there in the description, and it's there in our sort of main video description. So if you want to donate to that, that's a completely anonymous donation link. You can donate basically whatever you want, from a tiny amount to a massive amount, and it will be sent in whatever your cryptocurrency is, and we will get it as a US dollar stable coin. Apart from that, there's not really that much else apart from liking and subscribing for now. But as we said earlier, we are working very hard to set up 2 organizations, one in Europe and one in India, that will allow us to start fundraising directly. And we'll give you lots more information on that soon. So we will hopefully have a Patreon, a GoFundMe. We'll provide a PayPal link. We'll have an Indian Avaz and Milap link. And we'll have 2 organizations wherein you will be able to directly donate and also get tax benefits, because of course they're not-for-profit setups.
I am assuming you adopted those dogs from where you were?
Yes, all of our dogs are adopted. They all came from all sorts of different backstories. They were dumped in the forest, or they had been attacked by an animal or by a car or hit by a car or whatever. So all of our dogs are rescues. They're all street dogs, and the youngest one is now nearly 8 years old. So we made a decision quite a few years ago to stop taking new dogs, because they're obviously a huge commitment and responsibility, and we love them very dearly, as you've probably noticed. So we stopped taking on any new dogs because otherwise we would never be able to leave. So they're all rescues. We love them massively, and we will cherish them and care for them and love them until their last days. And eventually, when they are with us no longer, then we again have the freedom to be able to go and do something else. And once we have our permanent final home where we own the land and we have the project that we know will support us and be our home for the rest of our lives, then we can again start getting some rescue dogs. I would advise any one of you who are looking to buy or to get a dog, don't buy one, go to the shelter, go and find one on the streets that really is looking terrible and shoddy. Even if it looks like a horrible dog, with just a little bit of love, the hair will come back. They will look like a beautiful dog. And there is no dog that will love you and care for you and protect you more than one whose life you've saved. So that's all the questions for now. And hopefully they were interesting for you guys. This is something that's a little bit different, but if you enjoyed this format of video, let us know. And if you have other questions for us to answer in the future, then please drop them in the comments down below, because we can definitely do this again. And it's always very, very interesting to hear from you guys. So just want to say it has been incredible to have you guys along. We've had so many messages of support and so much goodwill. We are now over 3,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. When we started this journey in November, we were at, I think, 375. We're now at over 3,000, which does mean that we are at the very early stages of monetization, which means it is really literally starting to support the work that we do, which is amazing. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you guys so much for being on board, and hopefully we can grow and create ever better and more interesting content. Thank you very much, and we will see you soon.